Well, hello, everybody. I am Carl Gladstone. I work as a regional staff person for the Young People's Ministries office. And today on Reverb, we are talking with Jeremiah Gibbs, who is at the University of Indianapolis. The Lilly Foundation has just made a new grant to some programs there through the campus ministries of that fine institution. Jeremiah, welcome. And I'm glad to have you here to tell us a little bit more.
Thank you. Yeah, glad to be here. Glad to talk about what we're doing. It's exciting for us, and certainly exciting for some of the students that get to participate.
So how long have you been at UIndy, and can you tell us a little bit about your role there?
Yeah, so I started in 2009, originally in an interim role with the Lance Center for Christian Vocations, which is our spiritual formation program and theological education here at UIndy. UIndy is a United Methodist institution. Sometimes when you hear University of Indianapolis, it doesn't sound like that would be a United Methodist institution, but it is. So I started in 2009 as the interim director, and within a couple of years became more permanent staff and faculty here. So my role is now as university chaplain, overseeing the religious life here, supervising the other staff, chaplaincy staff, and so on, helping to give direction and guidance to the spiritual formation program, and some teaching, although over the years my teaching load has actually decreased as other responsibilities have been taken on, and so I'm doing less and less teaching in recent years, but enjoy doing all of it. So I'm glad when I get to any piece of it.
So for those who might not be familiar, I mean, you guys are set up a little bit like maybe Ohio Northern or some other places because of the integration into as a United Methodist related school. There might not be kind of my lights go off there, but there might not be an existing something like a Wesley Foundation or some of those other kind of terms that we might see elsewhere. But the opportunities for a real kind of integrated campus ministry are there. Is that kind of a good description?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So we do have for about 10 years now, we've had groups like Campus Crusade, Chi Alpha, and some of these parachurch organizations have had presence on our campus, including a United Methodist Student Association. But the United Methodist Student Association, for better or worse, often functions for service and fellowship events and things like that, because most of our United Methodist students are involved in the chaplaincy program. So they're involved with our chapel leadership, and they're involved with other components. The chaplaincy at our university, because we are very much a pluralistic institution. We have lots of students on our campus from Muslim backgrounds and Hindu backgrounds and non-religious backgrounds and so on. And so we have tried to provide services and sort of direction for lots of different kinds of campus communities, including our religious community on campus. The chapel community is ecumenical, and so all of our ministries there, we have United Methodist participating as one of many parties in an ecumenical ministry. And we really think about ecumenical as lots of different religious traditions contributing the best of their gifts. We try to avoid kind of the lowest common denominator. Let's all be generally Christian kind of perspective, which has its merits in certain ways as well. But we've really said, why don't you bring the best of the Methodist tradition, bring that unity of piety and social action, bring covenant discipleship practice, bring some of these practices into the context as one party among many parties. And bring for our Catholic students to bring some of their practices of prayer, and we do a daily, we do noonday, midday prayer, very much in kind of the Catholic monastic tradition, and so really drawing upon lots of different traditions within the whole of the campus ministry. And then we've got these student groups that are more specific to various traditions, like the United Methodist Student Association and so on. So
Sure.
It's kind of a unique structure in that sense.
So you work with college students in the day-to-day and throughout their career there at the school, but the Lance Center is also helping younger folks, youth, do their own kind of vocational discernment. Can you talk a little bit about the Student Leadership Academy?
Absolutely. So, I think probably in Indiana, we ended up in a situation not like lots of annual conferences across the country where the funding that was coming from denominational sources, from apportionment dollars and so on, just began to get smaller and smaller, and the support for campus ministry and what it meant for us to be a connectional ministry I feel like really had to be redefined, because I think in a previous generation it was thought of primarily in terms of the dollars that come from the annual conference to the institution, and that model is in many places is no longer there. I know there are some annual conferences where that's still very present, but for us it wasn't. And so we started talking with the leadership development folks at the annual conference and saying, what are the ways that we could sort of redefine this partnership in a way that benefits both the annual conference and benefits the institution, and what a partnership look like, so that we could redefine that mechanism. And one of the things that we also knew is that kind of what often used to be referred to as the pipeline from youth ministry into kind of clergy vocational discernment processes of going through that really didn't exist. I mean, so many of our students, when they get ready to make college decisions, are not making those decisions based on the religious identity of the institution that they go to serve. So, the pipeline had a big break in it, right? And so really thinking about what are the ways that we maybe even reestablish that pipeline in a new kind of configuration. So the way that we thought about that was originally the leadership development officer at that time, a pastor by the name of Brian Duran, who's up in northern Indiana now. He and I went to Exploration and kind of looked at what was happening with the Exploration event. And we decided to start a program that we called Exploration Youth originally. That was the original name. But part of what happened over time is we really wanted to do vocational discernment with high school students that was much broader than just for clergy folks. That was much really kind of a grassroots or ground level kind of vocational discernment practices. And we found out that really so many United Methodist clergy took that name of Exploration to be about students who were already thinking about clergy. And so that was the only students we were getting, and we really wanted that to be broader. So we rebranded that to be called Student Leadership Academy. And that Student Leadership Academy uses the resources of the Lance Center, both the curriculum resources, things that we do with college students in a 2-year-long format, and specifically the first course of that 2-year format. We took that first course and tried to make it into 3 days, really. What are some of the highlight components of that semester-long course, and how can we do that in 3 days for high school students to give them really just an overarching structure to think about vocation and calling? And besides the curriculum resources, also drawing upon the resource of the students that are going through a 2-year-long spiritual formation program here at the university, using them as small group leaders, using them as music leaders, in lots of different capacities with the high school students, because they really had multiple years in some cases to digest this vocational discernment model that we've been trying to use. And so it's really been a cool kind of partnership then over the last 6 years or so to be able to see all that come together.
That's great. So folks will come together for a retreat. This is happening in the fall?
That's right. It's a November event. Usually it's the weekend before Thanksgiving. And that has been solely United Methodist, promoted among United Methodists. We would have never turned anybody away that was from a different church or something like that. But all of our promotion channels and so on have been through the annual conference here in Indiana, and have been INUMC Youth. So. And
what's the feel of it? Is it young Methodists in suits carrying their leather-bound Bibles?
I would say one side of this, I should say, is that from the very beginning, we said this event was not going to be cool. Like it wasn't going to be bright lights and sort of. And now, as things have evolved, our worship services and so on have grown more elaborate, and we've gone more careful with the plannings of liturgies and class. And so it's becoming more of a cool event, but it still is very much. It is not an event that students they're not playing games and things like that. You know, there are times that they're
Yeah.
playing board games when they're back at the church, and
Right.
there's some free time on Saturday of the event, and so on. But this is really intended for students who are pretty mature in their faith. These are the top 2 or 3 strongest leaders from lots of different youth groups across the state. We've got a few youth groups that will bring 4 or 5 or 6 students, but mostly these are just a couple from each group. And then you end up with this really remarkable group of students who have gotten the best of the formation from their congregations, and bringing them into conversation with one another around topics that really matter to them. I mean, most high school students are really keen on trying to figure out what they're supposed to do, because they get this sense that they're supposed to know more about their calling than they do.
Yeah.
And so really being able to help them get into that. So it certainly, it has gotten to a point where our worship services and so on are pretty awesome kind of experiences there, and so on. But really from the core of this, we said we're trying to create an event that's centered around the relationships that they're going to create with clergy from the conference, with staff from the university, with college students from the university, and with one another, rather than trying to focus it around a really phenomenal program. I hope it is a phenomenal program, but that was never we never wanted that to be the main thing that the students were here to do. So
Smoke machines weren't on the original shopping.
yeah, there were no smoke machines. There's still no smoke machines, but but our our video capabilities and so on have gone up over the time, and we've been doing that better and better. But things like that. But still no smoke machines, and all of our lights are static for the entire for the entire event. So there's that.
So you've gotten to a certain point, and now with the investment of some Lilly funds, there's going to be some growth in that particular program, some additional programs around that. Can you talk about this transition?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Lilly Endowment Incorporated last year invested, I believe, in 92 or 94 institutions across the country to develop programs in develop programs in theological exploration for young people. Lots of them ended up being vocational programs, because Lilly Endowment a decade ago had funded a whole lot of colleges to do programs like ours. And so there are a number of them that are similar to ours, but there are others like University of Evansville here in Indiana. Theirs is more of kind of social justice and theology kind of program. They're taking on a variety of different sort of looks. And one of the great things about Lilly Endowment is they really give you the freedom. I mean, you have to write a competitive grant, but they really give the freedom to say, we're not the content experts here. We're not the ones that should decide how best to do this. We're going to hold you accountable to doing good work, and they will do that. But really giving us the freedom. And so what we did was essentially take the Weekend Academy in November. We're going to expand that to probably 2 or 3 times the size that it's been previously. So we've had maybe 80, 90 students each year. We think we may have somewhere in the neighborhood of 250 students that would be participating in that weekend event. And that's for all students, regardless of what kind of vocation they may be considering, what career they may be considering, and other capacities. And we really talk about vocation pretty broadly, not just about careers, but that becomes a kind of a central focus. And then the grant will also provide to create a new program in the summer, which we're just calling the Student Leadership Summer Academy, which will be a 12-day program in the summer. Will only take 40 students, and those 40 students will be students who are thinking about church ministry, either ordained ministry or youth ministry or missions. It's really sort of my philosophy that the narrowing down of that call comes much, much later. I don't think we're called to a specific thing, but we begin to get kind of in a stream and in a general direction. And then that God sort of works out the details of that later. So we're not sort of saying, we need you to be called to ordained ministry or something like that. But what about church ministry broadly? Are you thinking about missions work or youth ministry or ordained ministry or being a layperson, church staff, lay staff? And if you are thinking about those things, then really creating a 12-day program where we're going to kind of do theology at a deep level. So the first year we're planning, and that things could change a little bit depending on who the available faculty persons are for any given year. But the first year, our plan is that we would talk about healing and what does it mean to be agents of healing in the world. And we made our faculty and staff here at the university really are excellent in the health sciences. So maybe drawing upon some of our health sciences persons to talk about healing and those kind of those capacities, maybe drawing upon our psychological faculty to talk about healing in kind of a psychological sense, emotional sense, and to talk about healing in a supernatural or spiritual component as well. So all of those hopefully would kind of integrate throughout that 12-day event. And then each year we would have a different theme. So like one year we're going to talk about who is my neighbor, and that may be an opportunity to talk about immigration issues and so on. We'll talk about the idea of covenant, which may invite us both to think about baptismal covenant and marriage covenants and lots of different covenants that matter to us in our world. So really trying to engage social issues, but allow that engagement of social issues to be the context in which we are thinking about vocational discernment. So allowing that kind of deep theological conversation to inform the ways that these students would think about their calling to this work that we're doing in the church.
Do both the fall and the summer provide kind of, are college students serving as kind of small group leaders? Is there that kind of bridge building between youth and young adult?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's central to the fall event. So every student would be in a small group of about 7 or 8 that's led by a college student for the fall event. We don't know all the details of what the summer event is going to look like, but it's likely that some of our religion majors and ministry majors students would likely be small group leaders through that. We may draw upon the seminaries. I mean, we have 3 seminaries that are pretty close here with MTSO and United and Garrett. And so we may be drawing upon some of the seminaries to bring some persons in that would help with those small groups, but really want to be able to make the connection with other young people kind of providing the leadership of those small groups. It's a little bit tricky because we really believe strongly in the model of discernment that kind of comes out of the Lance Center. And so we want to make sure that we have persons that really own that. So that we have kind of a consistent message that's going through there. But yeah, so certainly that connection will be part of it. And we have a full-time staff member now, assistant director of the Lance Center, whose work is almost solely about the grant programs. And one of the things that he's going to be doing is providing some follow-up activities for both the fall event students and the summer event students that we've not previously had. We just didn't have the manpower, human power to be able to create the follow-up that we really would want to be able to do with these students, because part of what we know is that these students are theologically engaged at really deep levels, more so probably than what they can get from their youth groups, right? Because if you think about what happens in a youth group of 10 or 12 kids, and there's these 2 kids over here who are, you know, light years ahead of the rest of the students in their faith formation, theological thinking, and so on. And the youth minister, the pastor, or the youth workers, they have to sort of cater to the whole, right? I mean, they can't be out here when 10 kids are not there. So part of our thinking is, let's take all those kids that are ready for the deep thinking that can happen in this kind of environment and bring them together and give them a context with all young people who are already at that faith formation level and that theological formation level, and let them engage together. And then how do we create a community out of that? And the answer to that is not clear to us, because high school students aren't on things like Facebook anymore. You know, so what the mechanism is for creating a virtual community, and maybe some actual communities. There may be some follow-up events and stuff that we do. We haven't talked about what's going to be necessary yet to do that follow-up, but we're committed to then not allowing that event to only be the weekend or the summer event.
Sure. So. Our Cursilus friends have found the strength of the 4th day program.
Yeah.
Part of that. Yeah,
absolutely. And that kind of a perspective for sure.
Is this kind of discernment? Was it a factor in your own discernment into ordained ministry?
You know, I answered a call to ordained ministry in the Assemblies of God. And in the Assemblies of God, we, generally speaking, there was a notion that God had to sort of whisper in your ear, really, about what you were supposed to do. And so I'm not sure that I had that mode of thinking in mind when I answered a call. I thought maybe God was calling me in that way, and I've come to question more and more whether that's a normal way that God calls people. In fact, I would say definitively that that's not the normal way that God calls people into the various areas that they'll serve for their lifelong. So given that, I would say no, this wasn't the primary way that I discerned my vocation on the front end. But I would say that once I answered a call to pastoral ministry, and I knew that this is the direction that I was going to be going, I didn't know it at the time. I wouldn't have been able to have this kind of matrix of vocational discernment that we talk about in the program. I was thinking about some of these key pieces when I was thinking about what are my next steps. So for instance, when I was in seminary and decided to marry someone who's going to be a United Methodist elder, I made a decision that circumstance in my life probably meant that I needed to pursue the PhD that I was only thinking about before, because that was going to open up other possibilities for us to be a clergy couple. And I think I was using some of those same vocational discernment skills then, but probably not on the front end. And we really want to instill it from the front end so that students, because oftentimes students just kind of, I use the phrase that they throw a dart at the admissions catalog of their college, and that's sort of their major, and that's a really bad way to figure out what God is calling you to do, but that's often what it looks like. So
in the startup field, they talk about having runway to succeed, right? They get these investments or something. It's just giving people long enough time to figure out where their life might pivot and what innovation they can create in the world. And I'm glad that have some ways of helping young people do that with their, vocational call and their sense of a kind of a rooted discipleship that really they have for their whole lives.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's great.
Yeah, I think it's, we have an opportunity to put some realistic expectations. One of the challenges that we know are there for young adults or for high school students especially, is the reality that, if we were talking about 15-year-olds of the last two generations or so, a 15-year-old would have probably been doing some meaningful work in their family's business or on the farm, or they would have had some capacity in which they were engaging sort of real work and real meaningful kinds of stuff. And now, because of the lengthening of adolescence, so that many of us don't get our sort of first big kid job until we're 26 or 27 years old, there's this extremely long period of physically being an adult, but not being able to engage in activities that make somebody an adult.
Right.
And so what ends up happening then is they get to age 18 and the only job they've ever done is work for Subway. And not that working for Subway is a bad thing, but that often is not meaningful work for them. Now, it may be that they end up at management in Subway, and then they begin to recognize that the work that they're doing is affecting people's lives. And so then they can get a sense of vocation about that. So I'm a firm believer that the church has an opportunity to create an environment where people can do meaningful work, whether that meaningful work is organizing service projects for the congregation. Maybe it's volunteering in a local nonprofit. There are lots of opportunities for them to engage, for young people to engage. And I think they need that, or they can't then make a decision about what they want to do because they've never actually done any of it. They've never done anything that was really particularly meaningful because they were working at Subway.
Sandwich artists.
They were sandwich artists. Yes. Absolutely. So I think the church has a responsibility to young people who are in our pews. And I think that would also mean that they were much deeper connected with their faith when they go out into the work world, because then they begin to see that my work as an accountant is an expression of my faithfulness to God. Right. And I don't think that many students are able to put those pieces together. And so it just becomes their faith becomes less and less important to paying the bills or whatever other kind of pressures are on them as young people. So
Yeah. Well, as you think about the work that the Lance Center has already done, particularly with the Student Leadership Academy, are there a student or two that pop to mind and that you could tell a little bit of their story?
yeah, I think an example might be a student, Deanna. Deanna's from Fort Wayne, and she came to the program. And so the first year of the program, the first time a student comes, they are given this model of vocational discernment, and they begin to piece together some of the ways that God might be calling them into various fields. The second year that they come, we use that same model of vocational discernment, but now we encourage them to think about what is some reasonable scale, I don't want to say small scale, but reasonable scale program, project, something that they could do in their local congregation or local community that would be close to their passions, close to their giftings, and meet some need in the world. So Deanna had come to the program a couple of years, and we actually have some small grant funding to be able to help them kind of get those things off the ground if they need some financial resources. Deanna came to the program. She was really thinking about her own passion for clean water, and she was very well networked with lots of students. She was well liked, and so on, both within her youth group and her school. And she connected with somebody who was able to help her do some graphic design work, and they created a T-shirt that they sold for clean water fundraiser. And so she went out and sold these T-shirts and got people and then that becomes an education opportunity. She was able to speak to people about clean water and how they can make a difference in people's lives and so on. That would be one example. We've had students that have, for their projects, there was one student that did an anti-bullying campaign in their local school. We had another student who just started a FCA style Bible study before school in their class in their local school. So we've had students that have taken those passions in lots of different directions for those small scale projects, and certainly there have been lots of students that have simply been enriched in their understanding of the careers that they're going into. I mean, that's the piece that's sort of intangible. The fortunate thing now for me is that I now have students who've gone through the program and are now coming to UIndy as students in our program, which was how this was a mutually beneficial program, by the way, is that we knew that if students were on our campus and engaging with our faculty, engaging with our students, that they would think about us when they started making decisions about college. And so now we have students that are in the program. In fact, we'll probably this year we'll have the first group of students. Well, we had one student last year, but we'll have a group of students this year that are now UIndy students who are serving as small group leaders for the program that they came through when they were juniors and sophomores and so on in high school. So we're kind of the first alum group that will now be serving as small group leaders. But that has been really rich for me because I'm able to see when they get here how far along they have come in their kind of vocational journey. And it's still, they're 19 years old, so they are 18 years old. They still don't necessarily know what they want to do with their lives, but they're much more settled about how to get there, I think, than most young adults that I've seen. So that's really refreshing.
Sounds like this is a program that is trying to be honest about this kind of new era that millennials, younger folks live in. It feels like the era of the immediate cause, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, there's no reason why you can't save someone's well in Africa. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, absolutely.
Like all the tools you need to do that are on your phone.
Absolutely. Literally, right? I mean,
yeah.
I mean, I remember, not to interrupt, but I remember when we were planning to go to Haiti and we were learning about issues in Haiti, and I ended up not getting to make this trip, but literally I was able to learn how to help them make coal from YouTube. I mean, I didn't know how to do it, but there was already well-established parameters on YouTube, and you just, so yeah, students have amazing resources available to them to be able to make a difference.
Well, and in some other era of the church, I'm sure that vocational discernment would have taken the form of the same kinds of, what do you feel passionate about, what do you feel called to, and then the output, the action oriented thing was, great, now sign up for this appropriate committee in our superstructure.
Yeah.
And it's exciting to see ways in which the church is kind of engaging, taking the model of Kickstarter seriously.
Yeah.
And seeing how you can take that intense vocational discernment and then just connect people with these kind of amazing technological platforms in the world that can really just launch them into some really, really interesting discipleship and missional living.
Yeah. And I think the whole idea of sort of find out what committee we can put you on. We've actually sort of incorporated that in a sense too, but not until the third year of the program. So if they come back as a third year to the program,
sure,
we put them through a kind of a confirmation 2.0 kind of thing where they begin to learn about the UMC structures and how they can contribute, and they learn about the disciplinary requirements of having young adults within the committees.
Yeah.
And so on. And then giving them some instructions to say, if your local congregation, and really encouraging the churches then to use these students, which is part of the process too. But if you feel called to some certain area, education within the church or something, here's, the discipline says that we need you on these committees, and you are a real participant in the committee, not a token sort, and really encourage them. Right. What does it mean for you as a 17-year-old to engage this group of adults around, for instance, Christian education in your congregation and that kind of thing? So we do have that component of it at the end where it's like, okay, you're a United Methodist. Usually these are the super Methodists, right? Because they've been back like 3 years now.
Metho nerds.
Yeah, they're the Metho nerds. And so, hey, Metho nerd, here's the ways that you can best engage your local congregation, or here's the annual conference structure. And a lot of these students are also students who might be candidates to serve as annual conference equalization delegates and things like that. And so really giving them kind of Methodist 201 so that they know how to engage their church, both their local church and the denomination.
Yeah, so that continues to be a part of the way that they can respond, and not the only way.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Jeremiah, thanks so much for being with us today. We always want to make sure that you have the opportunity to help people know where to find more information and how they might support the program if there's ways to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think first thing, if they're interested if they have students who would like to participate in the program, for the fall event, registration will be closing on November 1. So they actually still have some time to get students registered. In the past, we've not had students from out of state. We've only promoted it within our annual conference, but we certainly would welcome students from other annual conferences to register and to be a part of that fall event. And that'll be November 18 to 20, I think, are the dates. It's that Friday to Sunday. So November 1 deadline. If they want to register for that, they can just look on Indiana United Methodist Church, inumc.org. That's the annual conference website, and just search for Student Leadership Academy on there, and they should pretty easily be able to find the registration for that. The Summer Academy, we do not have a registration site up for that yet, but certainly continue to take a look at the INUMC website, and we think that we'll have at least the information for dates and everything up by the November event. So in the next 8 weeks or so, we'll have a schedule for our summer event and know a little bit more about how that's going to come together. Folks that may want to contribute, certainly call me. Would love to talk with them and put them in touch with our development office here at the university, because we will be, with the Lilly Endowment funds are for 4 years. And so we really are already beginning to think about some sustainability pieces, and there may be ways that a donor could pick up scholarships, taking responsibility for scholarships for certain students. They may be able to take on certain, like if they wanted to fund the grant program and provide resources for some smaller piece of the program, we would have opportunities for that. And they can certainly contact me at Gibbs, Gibbs, at uindy.edu.
Great. And we'll put some of those links in the show notes. Awesome. And I guess people could also just start making T-shirts, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely.
Supporting the work that you do.
Student Leadership Academy T-shirt.
Well, thanks so much. We'll be sharing this around and praying for all the young people that are involved. And thanks again, Jeremiah, for talking with us.
Thanks a lot.